Hey guys, so as the month of July is coming to an end, we'll be taking a look at all of the latest polls that have been released for the 2022 Senate elections. We are now just a little bit over 3 months away from the midterms this November, and so in this month we have seen a lot of new polls come out basically from every single competitive race on the ballot this November, and in every single one of the toss-up races, Democrats have led in every single poll that has been released from them this month. So of course we have new polls from Georgia, showing Warnock up by 4 and 9%, released just a couple of days ago, as well as a new Pennsylvania poll, a lot of polls from Utah and Iowa. These Iowa polls are extremely concerning for the GOP. We also have new polls from Washington, as well as, of course, Nevada, showing Masto up by 3%, and of course, these Ohio polls, which gave Tim Ryan a 5% lead, and then previously, we saw more polls from Ohio giving Ryan 9 and 12% margins over JD Vance. So in this video, we'll be taking a look at all of the Senate polls that have been released this month and what they mean for the respective races on the ballot this November. So starting off with the state of Georgia, these Georgia polls came out just a couple of days ago, and Warnock is now up on average by 3.3%. This is the largest margin that we have seen for the Georgia Democrat, and if we look at all of the polls that have been released over the last couple of months, Raphael Warnock has led in every single poll since the month of April, except for this one Data for Progress poll that showed Walker up by 2%. And so before this, Herschel Walker was leading in the Georgia Senate race. He was expected to defeat Raphael Warnock, but now Warnock has taken a significant lead and is up on average by 3.3%. And if you look at the 538 forecast currently, Democrats have a 49% chance of winning. Georgia has always been the state out of the three toss-up races of Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Nevada. Georgia has always been the one that has favored the Republicans the most here on 538. However, Herschel Walker's chances have gone down drastically in just the last couple of weeks. If you look at this forecast just a month ago, he had a 61% chance of winning. Now he has a 51% chance at victory. And if you look at the DDHQ forecast here in the state of Georgia, Decision Desk HQ gives Raphael Warnock a 72% chance at victory. And you see the difference that those two new polls made. Democrats now have a 72% chance at winning, just 27.9 for Herschel Walker, and DDHQ currently gives Raphael Warnock a 2.9% lead in the polls. And so if you look at the 2022 race here between Warnock and Walker, this really is a race that Republicans should be winning in, and this is one of the most vulnerable Democratic seats currently. But Raphael Warnock's polling numbers, as well as his popularity in the state over Joe Biden's, is really making this a very difficult flip for the Republican Party. So currently Democrats hold a 3.3% lead, with Raphael Warnock leading over Herschel Walker. So Georgia is going to be a lean state currently, at least according to the polls. Now moving on to the state of Pennsylvania that we talked about in detail just yesterday. Make sure you check out that video if you haven't. But looking at the most recent poll here, John Fetterman leads by a margin of 9% over Mehmet Oz. We saw 3 polls released last month that showed Fetterman up by 4, 6, and 9%. So John Fetterman has been able to hold on to the significant lead that he has in this race. The Senate seat in Pennsylvania is currently held by a Republican. Pat Toomey won this seat in 2016. He will not be running for his re-election this time around. However, Mehmet Oz is proving to be a very weak Republican candidate. Despite John Fetterman literally being in the hospital for the last 2 months, Mehmet Oz is still down in the polls by 9%. So the Republican Party is struggling here in Pennsylvania, and this will make their chances at winning the Senate as a whole much more difficult if the Democrats can indeed pull off a flip here. And John Fetterman has proven to be a very strong candidate. Even though he has barely gotten back onto the campaign trail, John Fetterman holds a significant lead over Mehmet Oz, and so that is why right now the state of Pennsylvania is going to be likely on this map, at least according to the latest polls that we've seen. In the state of Illinois, Tammy Duckworth currently leads by a margin of 9% against Kathy Salvi. This race is not going to be very competitive at all. I still expect Tammy Duckworth to win by the solid margin that she won by in 2016. However, right now, the latest poll does project a likely margin of victory for Tammy Duckworth. This poll is not very good for J.B. Pritzker either. He only led by 10% in the governor's race. However, both of these incumbents are likely to win by over 15% nonetheless. But right now, according to the latest polls, the state of Illinois is only going to be likely likely for the Democratic Party as well, just like Pennsylvania. I mean, this most recent poll from the state of Illinois matches the most recent one from Pennsylvania, and this really just shows you how much trouble the Republicans are in, at least in the Keystone State. Next up, we have the state of Utah. I mean, this really would not be a race that I would normally talk about at all. However, in the state of Utah, Mike Lee only leads by a margin of 9.6% against Evan McMullin. If you look at all the polls that have been released, I mean, really, Mike Lee has not been leading by solid margins at all. This is a race that he won by a margin of 41% in 2016. However, now that he is running for his re-election, it will be much more difficult for the Republican incumbent. I mean, Kevin McMullin is not a Democrat. He is a conservative independent, which means that he will be able to get a lot of the never Trump vote that would not vote for Mike Lee. Mike Lee is, of course, a Republican. He is on the Trump side of the Republican Party, and Donald Trump is not especially popular in the state of Utah. In 2016, Donald Trump did not even win a majority of the votes in Utah because Evan McMullin won over a fifth of the vote in that presidential election. So Evan McMullin now is running as an independent. He's gotten the endorsement of the Democratic Party, so Democrats are going to vote for Evan McMullin, and of course, the never Trump wing of the GOP in Utah, which is a significant chunk of the Republican Party there, will also vote for Evan McMullin. And so that is why Mike Lee is now in an especially close race. However, in the end, it will not really matter too much for Democrats. Evan McMullin is not going to caucus with them. He's obviously going to caucus more with the conservative Republicans. However, right now, Mike Lee is still up by 9.6%, so it is still unlikely that McMullin pulls off a win here. Independents typically do worse than what polling may suggest, but right now the state of Utah is only going to be likely for the GOP. And moving on to the state of Iowa, Chuck Grassley led by 8% in the two most recent polls released. A previous one released this month showed him up only by a margin of 5%. However, this one was conducted by the Michael Franken campaign. So yes, Michael Franken stands no chance here in Iowa, but Chuck Grassley is in the closest election he's been in since his first one in 1980. He is now running for an 8th term, and when incumbents run for their 8th term, they typically are not going to lose. It would almost be impossible for Chuck Grassley to lose this race. However, if you look at his margin in 2016, he won by 24% against Patty Judge. In 2010, he won by a margin of 31%, and it gets even larger in 2004. So Chuck Grassley has won many elections in the past by very solid margins. However, as he gets older, it has become difficult for him to maintain these very solid margins. So right now, Iowa may be a likely state in the very end, but still, Chuck Grassley is almost guaranteed to win this race. I mean, just look at the 538 forecast. He has a 98% chance at victory, and on Decision Desk HQ, his odds stand at over 99%. So Iowa right now, it will still go to Chuck Grassley, but it will only be a likely state, at least according to the latest polls we've seen this month. In the state of Washington, Patty Murray is up by 20 and 18% according to the two latest polls released this month. I mean, previously she was up by a margin of just 5% in an internal poll conducted by the Smiley campaign. Other polls last month showed her up by 11%, as well as one earlier this year, which put her up only by 9%. So Murray was expected to be in a pretty close race. However, these two latest polls show Murray up by solid margins, so most likely she is not going to be in that competitive of a race. There will be a blanket primary here, which will choose the top two candidates to advance to the election in November, and those top two candidates are almost guaranteed to be Patty Murray and Tiffany Smiley. Patty Murray won by a solid margin in 2016. However, considering that she was running for her 5th term, it was not that solid of a margin in a state that Joe Biden won by a very solid margin in as well. Patty Murray really should have won by over 20%, but as of right now, the state of Washington is going to be solid for the Democratic Party once again. I do think Patty Murray can pull off a victory of over 15%, and these latest numbers just reaffirm that. And in the state of Nevada, we have the most competitive race of the year, where Kathleen Cortez Masto is running for her re-election. She has a 0.8% polling lead over Adam Laxalt. She's led in the two most recent polls by 3%, 21% in a previous poll. The last poll that Adam Laxalt led in was all the way back in April, and he was only up by 1% in a poll funded by a Republican super PAC. So the numbers really are not that great for Laxalt, even though he is a better candidate than Herschel Walker in Georgia and Amendment odds in Pennsylvania, he is still struggling with the national environment turning against the Republican Party. I mean, the Democratic Party nationwide are doing much better than they were just a month ago. And if you look at the polls released last year as well as earlier this year, Luxalt was doing relatively well. However, now Catherine Cortez Masto does have a very slight advantage. If you look at the 538 forecast, she has a 53% chance at victory. On DDHQ, they give her a 56% chance at victory, so really not that much better than a pure coin toss, but Masto is still slightly favored. The polls show that as well. And so looking at this race right now, it may be the most competitive, but Democrats will not even have to win in Nevada if they can flip Pennsylvania and hold on to Georgia, which they are currently very likely to do in both of these states. So as of right now, the state of Nevada is going to be tilt for the Democratic Party, with Masto holding a slight 0.8% polling lead against Adam Luxalt. Next up, we have the state of Ohio, another state in which the GOP has probably made a mistake in who they chose to nominate. J.D. Vance is not the most electable candidate by any means. I think they would have done better even with Josh Mandel, who lost to Sherrod Brown in 2012. However, Tim Ryan now leads by a margin of 0.4% against J.D. Vance. He took the lead at the very beginning of this month, and if you look at all the most recent polls, at least the last 6 polls, all show Tim Ryan ahead. However, 3 of them were funded by Democratic sponsors. One of them was even the Tim Ryan campaign themselves, and 3 of them were SurveyMonkey polls. These were online polls. That does not mean that they're inaccurate. It's just the fact that their methodology is not the best, and of course, these numbers were obviously skewed in favor of Tim Ryan. So Tim Ryan is probably still not going to win this race, even if his polling numbers are this good. These last 6 polls have not been the most objective ones, and if you look at the 538 forecast, Tim Ryan still only has a 17% chance at victory. His odds are a little bit better here on DDHQ. He has a 27.3% chance at winning. So really, Tim Ryan is still very competitive in this race, but in the end, against J.D. Vance, it is unlikely that he wins. Ohio is still a state that's voted for Donald Trump by 8% in the last 2 presidential elections, and the state is not shifting left in any way. Yes, Sherrod Brown was able to win in 2018, but 2022 is a very different year from 2018, and Tim Ryan is not Sherrod Brown. So as of right now, the state of Ohio is still going to be tilt on our map because Tim Ryan leads by a margin of 0.4%, but in the end, it is unlikely that he ends up on top. In the state of Florida, we saw a couple of new SurveyMonkey polls showing Rubio up by 8, 5, and 10%. I mean, really not too much to talk about here in Florida. Yes, Florida is typically a close race. It was the closest election in 2018, but Marco Rubio is a strong incumbent, and Val Demings does not really stand too much of a chance. She is going to end up winning the Democratic primary, which will occur on the 23rd of August. However, Marco Rubio is going to defeat her nonetheless. Florida right now is going to be a likely Republican state. There's no doubt about that. Not too much to talk about here in Florida. It's going to go to the GOP without a doubt. However, we do have a much more competitive race here in the state of New Hampshire, with Maggie Hassan running for her second term in office. She was nearly elected in 2016 against Kelly Ayotte. It was one of 2 flips of the year, but this time around, she is probably going to be in a much less competitive race. Yes, New Hampshire is still going to be close. It's probably not going to be a likely state, and if you look at the most recent polls, Hassan only leads by 4% against Donald Boldeau and 3% against Chuck Morse. But Democrats are favored here in New Hampshire. Jeanne Shaheen won by a solid margin in 2020, and Joe Biden by 7% in 2020 as well. So at least as of right now, Democrats are expected to win in New Hampshire once again, with Maggie Hassan as the incumbent. There's only been one poll that showed either Donald Boldeau or Chuck Morse ahead, and this was a poll conducted by the University of New Hampshire all the way back in April that put Morse up by 2%. And so as of right now, Maggie Hassan is in a good position going into a re-election. A late Republican primary means that both Donald Boldeau and Chuck Morse are going to have a lot less time to campaign as the official nominees. We're still quite a ways away from the final matchup being decided here in New Hampshire, but Maggie Hassan is comfortable. She leads by 4 and 3%. That's basically a lean margin according to the latest polls. The state of New Hampshire is going to be a lean state as of right now, and this will actually be the 52nd seat on this map for the Democratic Party. We also have a new poll out of the state of Alaska, but it's going to go to a Republican no matter what. So really not too much to talk about here. Whether it's Lisa Murkowski or Kelly Tshibaka, a Republican is still going to come out on top in Alaska. If you look at these polls here, they are basically one ranked choice voting poll, which is why you have 4 candidates down to 3 and then down to 2. And in the final poll, Lisa Murkowski leads by 4% against Kelly Tshibaka. If you look at the 538 forecast, currently Lisa Murkowski has an 85% chance at victory, just 10 for for Kelly Tshibaka. This ranked choice voting system really is very beneficial for Murkowski, and she is probably going to end up winning her re-election anyways. So as of right now, the state of Alaska is going to be solid for the Republican Party, just because both of the top two candidates currently are Republicans. Lisa Murkowski may not be a Trump Republican, but she is still very much a Republican and votes with the GOP most of the time. And finally, in the state of North Carolina, Ted Budd only leads by a margin of 1.8% against Cheri Beasley. If you look at the most recent poll release, this was conducted by Trafalgar. Ted Budd led by a margin of 3%. If you look at all four of the most recent polls released, I mean, 3 of them were Republican funded. They did show Budd ahead, but the most recent independent poll showed Cheri Beasley up by 4%. So Cheri Beasley really is very competitive in this race, but she is still unlikely to win and succeed Richard Burr, who will not be running for his re-election. So Ted Budd is still favored in this race. I mean, just look at the 538 forecast. He has a 72% chance at victory on DDHQ. His odds sit at 70, so very similar in North Carolina. Cheri Beasley does stand a better chance than Tim Ryan in Ohio, but still North Carolina is a state that has not voted Democratic on the presidential level since 2008. And if you look at the last Senate election in the state of North Carolina in 2020, these were the final polls leading up to the matchup between Cal Cunningham and Tom Tillis. But in the end, Tom Tillis still won by 1.7%. So the polls in North Carolina have been known to repeatedly overestimate Democrats. So that is why this 1.8% margin is still very significant for Ted Budd. So as of right now, the state of North Carolina is going to be lean for the GOP, giving them 48 states. And so this right here is the 2022 Senate map based on the latest polls that we've seen this month. Obviously, I don't think Democrats are going to win 52 races. They're probably going to end up losing in Ohio. They may even lose Nevada, but I do think right now they're in a very good position in both Pennsylvania and Georgia. Obviously, I don't think Pennsylvania is going to be likely. It is very unlikely still that John Fetterman wins by over 5%. Pennsylvania is still probably going to be a lot more competitive than the polls suggest, but he is definitely winning in that state. And if you look at the latest generic ballot numbers, Republicans are now only up by a margin of 0.2%. I expect that in the next couple of days, Democrats do take the lead here. I do think that the Democratic Party is doing much better than they were just 1 month ago. I mean, looking at the generic ballot numbers at the beginning of July, Republicans were up by a margin of 2%. Now they're up by 0.2%. And this comes as Joe Biden's approval rating really is not getting any better. It did get better since just a couple of days ago. He is now down by around 16.5%. But still, Joe Biden's numbers are not improving at all, and we saw a huge shift negative just this month. However, the generic ballot numbers for Democrats as a whole are improving, and so with Democrats taking the lead in the generic ballot, they are also now favored to win according to the 538 forecast. They currently have a 53% chance at winning control of the Senate once again, and according to DDHQ, their odds stand at 59.6. So July has obviously been a very good month for the Democratic Party, but we still have 3 months to go, and a lot can definitely change in those months, and I will be updating you guys continuously until the midterms this November. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it if you enjoyed it. Comment down below which party you think will win the Senate, and subscribe to my channel if you have not, and I'll see you guys in the next video.